Hey, Limit Breaker, let me ask you something. Have you ever met a founder who's like incredibly smart? Like they read all the business books, they follow the marketing strategies, they listen to podcasts, but somehow their business barely moves forward. You look at them and think, how is that possible? Because on paper, they should totally be winning. Now, here's the interesting part. Sometimes that founder is not someone else. Sometimes it's you. And if you have ever felt that frustration, I want to show you something important. The problem is rarely intelligence. The problem is usually a habit pattern running underneath the intelligence. A lot of entrepreneurs believe success is about knowledge. If I learn enough strategies, eventually the breakthrough will happen. And so they read more, they study more, they go and they buy more courses because at first that feels productive. But something strange starts to happen. Their knowledge grows, but the results don't match that. It is like someone who studies fitness constantly. They know everything about nutrition. They know all about the training. They know all of these exercises. They know everything about recovery, but they never actually go to the gym. Knowledge and behavior are two completely different systems in the brain. One sits in logic, and the other one sits in habits. And habits are the things that usually win. Now, here's something most founders don't realize. Your brain does not prioritize success. Your brain prioritizes safety. And that means when pressure hits, the brain falls back on familiar behavior patterns. Not the best behaviors, just the most practiced ones. Think about what happens when you experience stress. Something like revenue dropping, a deal falling through, a client leaving. Immediately, the nervous system reacts. And when that's happening, something interesting occurs. The rational thinking part of your brain starts to lose control. And instead, the brain activates survival patterns. Patterns like avoidance, overworking, procrastination, overthinking, or maybe even chasing new ideas instead of finishing old ones. Have you ever caught yourself doing that? You know exactly what needs to happen, but somehow you end up doing something else? That's not laziness, that's habit. Well, let me give you a real world example. A founder once came to me with help for marketing. They were convinced that their biggest problem was lead generation. They believed that if they could just get more leads, their business would grow. And so we reviewed their marketing. We looked at their messaging. We looked at the funnels. We looked at their offers. And interestingly enough, their marketing wasn't that bad. But something strange kept happening. Whenever a strong lead appeared, they delayed the follow-up. Not once, not twice, over and over again. And sometimes they would wait 3 days, sometimes a week, sometimes longer. Now, when we explored it deeper, we discovered something interesting. They were not avoiding the task. They were avoiding the emotional risk of rejection. If they followed up and the prospect said no, it triggered something old, something that felt uncomfortable. So the brain protects them, not by solving the problem, but instead by avoiding the situation entirely, which meant that the business problem looked like marketing. But the real issue was emotional programming. Now, once that pattern was identified and interrupted, something surprisingly happened. Their revenue started to climb back up again. And not because the strategy had changed, you're still phoning and following up, but because the habit around it changed. Now, this is why so much business advice falls and fails the founder. Most advice focuses on the tactics, marketing tactics, sales tactics, growth tactics, but those tactics can absolutely work only if the founder executes them consistently. And that's where those things break down. Because founders are not machines. They have identities, they have fears, they have past experiences that shape their behavior, which means sometimes the biggest obstacle is not the market. It's the pattern running inside the founder themselves. Now, this is exactly why I started developing something called the Limitbreaker Method, because I kept seeing the same thing again and again. Smart people, hardworking founders, good strategies, but they all still felt stuck. The method is designed to uncover and break the internal patterns behind those results. Now, it works through 5 stages. First, we need to regulate you. You can't change behavior while your nervous system is in total, utter chaos. So we bring the brain back to a calm, focused state. Secondly, pattern recognition. We're not working on the business tactic. The behavior pattern instead is underneath it. Now, third, the cost analysis. What has this pattern actually cost you in revenue? Maybe in opportunity? How about on your confidence level? Now, the fourth pattern is we interrupt you. We interrupt the pattern that's going on. And this is where the founder consciously breaks the loop. And finally, reinforcement. Because new habits are not created through motivation. They're created through repetition. Now, if you are enjoying this conversation about psychology behind entrepreneurship, subscribe to the channel. Every week, I break down the habits, emotional patterns, and decision-making traps that shape business growth. Because most founders are trying to fix their problems from the outside. This channel is about fixing the patterns that drive it. Now back to the video. The biggest shift I see in founders happens when they stop asking one question. What strategy should I try next? And then they start asking a different question, which is, what pattern inside me is shaping the results that I'm getting? Because once you see the pattern clearly, something powerful happens. You stop blaming the market. You stop blaming the algorithm. And you stop blaming things like the economy. But what you do is you start upgrading the one system that you control, your own behavior. That is where real growth begins. Most founders are not stuck because they lack intelligence. They're smart, but they are stuck because they're running habits that once protected them. But those habits now are the things that limit them. And once you see that pattern clearly, you can start breaking it, which is what the limit breaker method is all about. Not becoming perfect, but constantly evolving past the limits that used to hold you back. And if it sounds like the kind of conversation you want more of, stick around. There's a lot more of that coming on this channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I don't sell dreams, I coach them to life. Breaking old habits like a chef with a knife. You stuck in a loop, I'll cut that twice. You ain't lazy, just wired wrong. Let's make it right.